Let's go! Today we'll be talking about the biography on Lewis Carroll. Let us get this started with right now. Alright, so here we go. Here we have the Lewis Carroll. Here we have his real name, Charles Ludwig Dodgson. Charles Ludwig Dodgson. He was born on January 27th of 1832 in Desbury, Cheshire, England. He was the third of 11 children, and albeit he was the oldest son in the family. Later on in his life, he would have develop a little of a medical case where he would go ahead and then go ahead and stutter. See what I just did there? He would stutter a lot, and this probably cost him a lot of bullying and things that we will build upon in the later chapters of his story. Charles Woodridge Dodgson himself was also had a lot of other health ailments, but I will not delve into those a little too deeply here. Later, in 1843, when he was around 11 years old, the family went ahead and moved to the spacious rectory, which was here in Croft. And I believe this is in Croft, Yorkshire. Can't be so sure, but most likely here. And in Croft, Yorkshire, he would go ahead and live there for pretty much the rest of his childhood. His father was appointed a rector here, and so it's during this time that our Charles Ludwig Dodgson would go ahead and start making homemade family magazines. Kind of wish I did that too. Later on, he went ahead and attended the prestigious rugby school. He himself personally hated and disliked the environment due to the shyness and the bullying. He was very shy, and he was also very bullied, most likely because of his stutter and other health ailments. But he excelled academically, and because he excelled so well in that area, he was able to go to a really good college. In this case, he was able to get into the Christ College, which is in Oxford University. And so this is where he graduated with a first class in math in 1854. Mathematics itself is a subject I could go ahead and delve in for a very, very long time, but I just know all the way until pre-calculus, so I cannot really say I know all of math yet. But Algebra 2 is pretty much the only kind of math everyone needs to know as a foundation. Everyone needs to know at least Algebra 2. And it was here that he was able to graduate in 1854 with as a first class of mathematics. He remained as a lecturer of mathematics, aka a tutor of mathematics, until 1881. Now, that's not important, but I will mention that in the later parts of the story. It was also during this time in 1856 that he would go ahead and adopt the pen name of Lewis Carroll, mostly because he was publishing a letter, and then he decided to do a little twist of his names, his first and middle names, of course. First of all, the Charles and then the Ludwig, he would go ahead and translate those into Latin. He would go ahead and translate his first two names into Latin, which would turn it into Carolus Ludovicus. He would swap them around so that it was now Ludovicus Carolus, and then he would translate that back into English, and that would become Lewis Carroll. Regardless, something I should probably mention is that universities, especially the public universities themselves, were heavily affiliated with the Church of England at the time. So obviously, he himself needed to become a little bit religious, and him being like more of a conservative in that religious field, he didn't try to delve into that realm a little too much. But the Church of England itself had other plans for him, and was able to ordain him as a deacon in the church. He would never get into full priesthood, though, mostly because of his stammer. This all happened in 1861. Now, it was also during this time that when the head of the Oxford University and themselves changed people, Lewis Carroll himself would become friends with the family of that dean, and because the dean of Oxford would go ahead and really liked him, mostly because he was able to get along well with the children, he would go ahead and let him do stuff with them, and even occasionally ask them to hang out with them as well too. So Lewis Carroll went ahead and started hanging out with little kids, and then one day on a boating trip down the river on July 4th. of 1862, he would go ahead and took the three little sisters down on a boating trip, and then when they asked him to tell a story, he told a story that he made up on the fly, and it was titled Alice's Adventures in Alice's Adventures Underground. And it was because of this book that when Alice Little went ahead and heard it, Alice Little was one of the little sisters too, and mostly so Alice in Wonderland, that Alice is mostly based on Alice Little. They went ahead and she went ahead and requested that he write it down, which he eventually did. Something I should probably mention is that he was also a very good photographer, and because he was a very good photographer, why is it this? Okay, there we go. Because he was a very good photographer, he would go ahead and take pictures of the kids as well too. So this was a little bit of something today. Some of the photos portfolios are mostly gone, but the ones that remain, half of those were mostly of young women, and all of them were either semi-clothless or entirely clothless, or in this case had pictures like this. They were mostly based upon the famous paintings and poems that he would go ahead and read. Like this one was probably inspired by the Lord Tennyson poem about a beggar. And this is Alice Little. Alice Little herself was in raggy clothes and would go ahead and had her hand outstretched, mostly either beckoning or begging. And this was supposed to make her look like a beggar, essentially. And eventually, that Alice's Adventures Underground turned into this Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, with very, very big tweaks in the text, of course, compared to the personal version that he told Alice. The Cheshire Cat, and then like the Mad Hatter, that kind of stuff. Also, it has become part and deeply ingrained in our pop culture nowadays. Like, if you ever watch Neo from The Matrix, then you go ahead and say, remember in the first opening lines, it will be like, of our introduction to Neo, it will be, follow the white rabbit. Now, this was originally published in 1865, but it was like due to like bad printing and typesetting, it was cancelled and withdrawn. But then the reprinting in 1866 held really, really big success. And because of that success, 6 years after the original publication, he would go ahead and write the 1871 sequel, Through the Looking-Glass, Alice Through the Looking-Glass, which also became an instant success. In fact, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland itself was so incredibly impactful in like children's stories of the entire world that it has become adapted into several movies, at least like 3 plays, 1 opera, and on and on and on. It's that influential. And in fact, there's even a computer game based on Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, and that itself was awesome. In 1881, he would go ahead and resign his mathematics lectureship at the Christ Church and later on, a few years later, in 1898, which is like 17 years later, he would go ahead and die. He died on January 14th of 1898, 13 days before his 66th birthday. And what we don't know, like some parts of his life, mostly because all we know about were based on his diaries and other primary and secondary sources. But it was very obvious that some pages from the diary were literally cut out, because they definitely were talking about little girls and what he was probably going to do with them. And there was a period in time where his relationship with the girls would go ahead and be damaged severely. But in the end, with that in mind, we have no idea what he did to get himself into bad terms with the Dean of Oxford again. Also, he was able to reconcile with the women, all the 3 sisters. Eventually, they started getting a little bit sick of him because, well, they were in their teenage years. It's like having a clown you hired for your birthday party, and he never leaves. Obviously, that's not something you really want from a literature kind of person. But Charles Lutwidge Dodgson, aka Lewis Carroll, has went ahead and told us an incredible story that reminds us of childhood. And as someone said, I cannot remember who, but as someone said, Lewis Carroll's books are the only times when we all become children. Truly children, that is. Okay, so I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Hunter and Sean. I hope to see you guys soon. Until next time, peace. Bye-bye.